the key. Open that book, turn that page, start learning stuff at any age. Read, read, read. Reading's what you need.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Evans. I'm a professor of English at Orange Coast College. Go Pirates! And I am thrilled to invite you to the S.T.E.A.M Race to Space Reading Challenge. Just for reading some amazing books about science, math, engineering, coding, you can win some incredible prizes. You can go to the tour the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. You can visit the Discovery Center, Cube Center. You can have a question and answer with astronauts and so much more. But most importantly, you'll learn how math, science, technology benefits all of us. So join us today in this race to space. After today's event, visit our website and register for this amazing adventure. So let's blast off by talking to some inspiring writers, scientists, and artists. Let's first welcome filmmaker, author, environmental advocate, Philippe Cousteau. Philippe is a multi-Emmy nominated TV host. You've probably seen him on Shark Week. You've seen him on the Travel Channel's Caribbean Pirate Treasure, or maybe you've watched his other TV shows like Awesome Planet or Oceans. Philippe is here to talk about his book, Follow the Moon Home, a tale of one idea, 20 kids, and 100 sea turtles. So Philippe, welcome.
Chris, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's fantastic to have you here. Before we talk about your book, which I loved, by the way, I have to ask you one question. You have dived the ocean depths. You have swam with sharks and whales. What is the coolest thing you have seen in the ocean?
That's a great question. There's so many different cool things I've gotten to see, but one of my favorites is watching baby sea turtles hatch and emerge out of their nest in the sand on the beach and crawl to the ocean. It is heartwarming and they're so adorable. It's a very special experience because it only happens, during one season of the year, and you never know when those baby sea turtles in that particular nest are going to hatch. So you're very fortunate when you're able to witness something like that.
Well, that's really what the premise of your book is, Follow the Moon Home. Can you tell us about Follow the Moon Home? What's it about?
Well, Chris, I spent a few years living on the eastern coast of Florida, and had the opportunity to work with a lot of turtle scientists down there because there's a lot of sea turtle nests down there. And of course, sea turtles are these extraordinary animals. They've been around for hundreds of millions of years, since the time of the dinosaurs. And they're under threat from a lot of different factors. Of course, it won't be a surprise, but a lot of times it has to do with people. And one of those factors that we encountered in Florida a lot is that baby sea turtles, when they are born out of their nest on the beach, they need to get into the water as quickly as possible. Now, unfortunately, they can be distracted by lights in homes behind them, because normally baby sea turtles are attracted to the brightest light source. That's how they know to go to the ocean. And that is the moon reflecting off the water. And so they'll head to the brightest source of light. But if there's a house on the beach with big porch lights on all night long, like a lot of houses do, that's brighter than the moon on the ocean. And so the baby sea turtles go in the wrong direction and they die. So for me, having experienced and witnessed that, and then learning about different programs and projects, oftentimes that are started by kids in those communities to get people to turn the lights off or to use red light bulbs, which the sea turtles can't see, in their homes, I was inspired to write this book, Follow the Moon Home, because my experience working with young people through my organization, Earth Echo International, has taught me that kids can change the world when they're kids. They don't have to, be grown-ups. In fact, kids are really the ones that inspire and change the world, much more in many cases than grown-ups. So I wanted to write that story because I was inspired by it, and I hope kids are too.
Well, Philippe, that's one of the things I love most about your book, I must admit. The teacher, Mr. J, gets his class involved. Viv and her classmates, they go to work, they solve a problem. And your book even ends with a letter to young activists. So what can all of our friends watching today do to protect the ocean, to protect the planet, to be problem solvers?
So the story of the book is about Vivian, and that she is on the beach. She's just moved to this town, and she sees a baby sea turtle that didn't survive, that didn't make it. And a friend of hers explains why. And so she identifies a problem. That's the first step in solving problems. And it doesn't have to be sea turtles. You don't have to live on the coast. We see all sorts of problems in our communities. And so it's finding a problem and then being inspired to understand that you can do something about it because you can. And then it's about creating a plan, talking to your friends and your family and your teachers, and really going through that process of realizing, okay, now what can I do? And I'm going to create a plan to actually do it. And then we're going to do it. And we're going to get the community involved. We're going to get our friends involved. So it's a testament to the power of young people, to the power of us when we all come together. And it's really a message about how any of us, all of us, no matter who we are, no matter where we live, can find challenges and problems in our communities, and we can help solve them.
Well, Philippe, I loved your book. Art was amazing. The story was incredible. But I really loved the ending. The ending of that was so beautiful. Can you talk about how you decided to end the book?
Well, I wanted to be, or I was inspired by experiences that I had of being able to watch these little baby sea turtles, head off and follow the moon, hence the title of the book. And to watch them go off into the ocean is and go and onto this magical journey that they're going to to experience for decades. I mean, these sea turtles can live over 100 years, and so knowing that some of the projects that we engaged in Florida would make sure and help ensure that these baby sea turtles were going into the ocean, not going backwards towards the lights, is a really inspiring moment. That these sea turtles will live for 100+ years because of the work that you did.
Well, Philippe, I have one more question for you. I live in Huntington Beach, and as you know, we've just had a terrible oil spill. What do you say to the kids today? Like, what can we do about something like that to make sure our oceans are protected and we can swim and have a wonderful place to visit and a wonderful place to sustain life?
Chris, I appreciate that question. When we think about everything from sea turtles, every single species of sea turtle is either threatened or endangered. Do we think to the big issues like, ocean health, and of course oil spills? I visited the oil spill down in Huntington, and I've seen many oil spills over the course of my life. I think my recommendation to all of you is to recognize that it starts in your backyard, it starts in your community, and recognizing that when you see even a small problem about pollution or animals that need help or land that needs to be protected, or maybe a law that can get passed to help cut plastic in your community. Those kinds of things are campaigns and efforts that you can make and you can take that have a real positive impact on the world. And that's what's going to solve this problem, is all of us coming together and all of us recognizing we can't sit back and expect someone else to fix the problem, that we have to be part of it. And that when we are part of it, it is the most exciting, empowering, wonderful thing. There's a lot of problems in the world. Even young readers, early readers that we work with, kids, they know this, right? And so we have the power to change it. You have the power to change it. And that's the message at the end of the day, is we don't have to just sit back and be worried about the world and anxious and afraid, or we can actually take action and solve problems and build a better world together. And that's a hopeful, wonderful, exciting thing we can all be part of.
Well, Philippe, thank you so very much. I'm curious, have you read your book to your young child?
Oh, many, many times. I've got a 2-year-old daughter, Vivian. We read, and actually, the name Vivian she's named after her in the book. So we've read that book many, many times.
Well, enjoy that time. Read with her closely. Thank you.
Every day. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Philippe, thank you. Next up, we are joined by New York Times bestselling author Gabrielle Prendergast. She is an award-winning writer, teacher, designer, and she has some amazing books: Audacious, Capricious, Zero Repeat Forever, and Pandas on the East Side. Gabrielle will be talking about her wonderful book, If Pluto Was a Pea. So Gabrielle, welcome.
Hi,
There's
it's nice
the
to be
book.
here. I'm thrilled.
Oh, it is so wonderful to have you here. So I have to begin my questions with this. Have you always loved astronomy, space, planets? How did you get interested in this topic?
I have always loved planets. I've loved looking through telescopes. And, I'm a science fiction author, so space and all the possibilities of space travel have always been very much in my mind. Even when I was a kid, I was really into Star Wars and Star Trek and all that kind of stuff. So I've always loved the planets. This book actually came about around the time that Pluto was demoted to a dwarf planet. And my daughter at the time was, I think she might have been 7 or something like that. And she was really affronted that Pluto had been demoted. So she asked me, like, how small is Pluto? Like, why this isn't fair? And so I said, well, if Earth was like, say, a golf ball, Pluto would be the size of a pea. And that's where the book came from, if Pluto was a pea.
Isn't it amazing how ideas start? Just a simple conversation with your child begins an amazing, beautiful book. Well, we have to address that. Do you think Pluto is a planet? What do you think about this demotion?
Well, I think it's really a shame because I think it would have been much more exciting if they had promoted one of the
Mhm.
other Kuiper Belt objects, like Eris, which is actually a little bit bigger than Pluto. The news that day, new planet, would have been just much better than
Mhm.
like, forget about Pluto. So
Mhm.
um, it's all a little bit arbitrary, right? I mean, they do have obviously, rules for what qualifies as a planet. But the I think the opportunity to make the world understand that the solar system is not limited to what we know. So when growing up, I was like, there are 9 planets, right? And that's just kind of accepted. But the truth is that we don't know that much about what is beyond the orbit of Pluto. And we might be surprised
Mhm.
by what we find as we explore more. To me, that's more exciting.
Mhm.
So I still think of Pluto as a planet.
I do as well. That's the way I learned it. I'm curious, you so beautifully explain the size of Pluto in your book. Can you give us some of the comparisons that you make for the size of Pluto to give us context?
Well, I think one of my favorite is and I probably the most important is to understand how big the sun is in comparison to Earth. So, in the book, it's described as a tent that is about 15 feet wide. So, if you imagine one of those sort of domed tents,
Mhm.
a very large one for a family, and then another one on the bottom, you get this large sort of um, 15-foot wide sun, and then the Earth is a golf ball compared to it. And I think a lot of people, especially young kids, don't understand that scale. Um, and then, of course, Pluto is this tiny little thing. So when I first was writing the book, I was thinking in terms of, a Volkswagen Beetle around that size.
Mhm.
So sort of one stacked on top of the other, and this giant thing with a little golf ball, or even the bigger planets. The Neptune is a grapefruit, right? It's still pretty small, or Jupiter is a beach ball, still pretty small compared to the sun.
Mhm. Beach ball of pea. What a comparison.
Yeah.
My Gabrielle, you taught me something, and I must admit, I'm an English teacher. Pluto has moons. I had no idea. Can you tell me about the moons of Pluto?
The moons of Pluto, I have them on my screen. Nix, Styx, Kerberos, and Charon. And Charon is the biggest one. So if Pluto was a pea, Charon would be like an apple seed. And I can't remember now. It's in the book. Nix and Styx would be too small would be like grains of sand.
Mhm.
And yeah, here it is. Nix, Kerberos, and Hydra would be like grains of sand, and the smallest moon, Styx, would be too small to see.
Mm, that's
So,
my
but they're still massive in terms of our understanding. So Pluto is the size of Brazil.
Mhm.
If you wanted, everything's the size of Brazil. If you wanted to park Pluto on Earth, you would need a parking spot as big as Brazil. So Pluto's smallest moon, Styx, would be like the size of a town in Brazil. So it's still pretty big. It's not like Styx is like a human size thing. You could walk around on Styx. Yeah.
Gabrielle, I like to think we started a new book today. Comparison to Brazil. You'll have to
Yeah.
find something there to write that new book.
Yeah.
Well,
Sometimes people compare things to Texas too, but Brazil is much bigger than Texas. So Pluto would need to land in Brazil.
well, Gabrielle, I really loved your book, but I
Too.
especially love the ending. Could you read those last few pages of your book and just talk to us about that?
Sure. If Pluto was a pea, Pluto's smallest moon, Styx, would be too small to see. And you would be much smaller than that, but still not too small to think big thoughts and do great things.
Gabrielle, why'd you decide to end your book that way?
I think, well, originally the book was, the ending was a little bit more information about the scale of the solar system. And the book was more, more of an educational book. And my editor wanted it to be more personalized like that and sort of simplify it. And so I started thinking about, my interest in writing about space or science or anything is kind of to find that meeting point between science and personal life, right? So that's one of the reasons why the objects in my book are things that you have in your house. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to bring it completely, full circle, right down to you. Like, who are you in terms of the scale of the planet? And also, this was like a little defense of Pluto at the end. Like, why did Pluto get demoted just for being small? Being small is not, it doesn't mean that you're not important, right? So that's kind of like a little, both my little dig at the planetary scientists, but also like a little reassurance for the child reader who's reading the book that size isn't everything, right? So that's how I decided to end the book. That's what I wanted to bring it back to the personal.
Gabrielle, I think it brought a smile to my face when I read those last 2 pages. So thank you so very, very much.
You're welcome.
I want to welcome our last guest today, Lenora Todaro. She is here to discuss her newest book, Sea Lions in the Parking Lot, Animals on the Move in the Time of Pandemic. It was just published earlier this month, and it's really wonderful. So Lenora, welcome.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for having me here.
No, thank you for being here. Your book begins with a question. What would happen if people all around the world stayed inside, away from the animals' habitats? Well, you discovered some pretty incredible things. Can you tell us about what happened?
It's been an amazing unplanned experiment that is still going on, and scientists are still compiling data about many of the changes. So when cities or countries went on lockdown during the pandemic, cars were parked, boats were moored, airplanes were grounded, schools were closed, and scientists started to notice that the air began to clear up and the water began to clear up. And then scientists noticed that animals began expanding their habitats, exploring a little bit further than they might have. And part of that is because there's so much development now that humans and wildlife are closer and closer together. So there has been a lot of habitat loss for a lot of creatures around the world. And this was so interesting because we could see how when we got out of the way and when we slowed down, animals began to thrive, many of them, in ways that were very reassuring.
You featured 12 animals in your book. Which one was your favorite? Which one did you enjoy really exploring the most?
Ooh, I'm such an animal lover that's hard to say, but I love the coyotes, in part because I've done a lot of writing about urban wildlife in New York City, and I grew up in the Bronx, and it was really exciting to me to find out that there were coyotes in the Bronx. Mm-hmm. And coyotes are mixed for some people, depending where you live. So I love the coyote story. I love the peepers, the frogs, up in Maine, because I like the sound that they make, and they're tiny. Oh my gosh, the flamingos are so beautiful, and the sea turtles, as Philippe spoke so eloquently about. Hard to pick, but those are some of my tops.
It's interesting. For many of our viewers today, we see coyotes in Southern California everywhere. They roam through neighborhoods. We see them on the hillside. We see them in very urban environments, and they have thrived during this time. And I too, by the way, I saw a coyote in Brooklyn when I was visiting there once before. So your experience is not unique.
Yes, I know.
Lenora, I love the artwork of your book. It was stunning. It was beautiful. Yeah. What are some of your favorite, pages that you have of artwork that just pop off the page because you have the story and the explanation of the animal, and then you have a single page of art every time. And every time you turn that page, it's amazing.
Art is so beautiful. The artist Annika Siems is a German artist, and she was trained in scientific illustration. But she also has a sense of humor. So in some of the art, you'll notice little funny jokes. So for example, when you open the sea lion spread, you see the sea lions pressed up against a shuttered store, which is from a real image. All of these stories are based on true events. But she put a little sign above the sea lions that has a fish on it. And it's so funny because, of course, I'm sure in California, you know a lot about sea lions. They do
Yes.
like fish. And I found that so funny. And in the peepers spread, in the frog spread, you see one little peeper, this is on the page with the text, looking up, and there's a little tiny insect up at the top. And the peeper has the funniest large eyes. I think her sea turtles are gorgeous. Yes, there they are. They're on the clothesline with a mask. So she put a mask in periodically, which I also thought was funny.
I think my favorite, the lions.
Oh, I love the lions.
It's such a wonderful image. Lenora, what can we do to continue to protect our animals now that the world has started to open up a bit more? How do we
Yes.
make sure we still protect them?
There's a lot of things that we can do. A lot of things that we knew before. For example, curbing coastal development so that our ocean life and sea life have a chance to breed safely. Turning lights down, which helps the turtles, as Philippe said, but also it helps birds. Here in New York City, we have a Lights Out program that's run through Audubon to try to turn the lights down when birds are migrating through. One thing that is happening around the world that I love is that wildlife crossings are being built. And one thing that we saw during lockdown is that the numbers of animals that were killed crossing the road dropped by almost 50% in some areas around the world. So how do we keep having that good success? Well, one way is building these wildlife crossings or tunnels. There are toad tunnels and elephants underpass and monkey bridges and all sorts of amazing natural architecture that's helping protect animals. And in terms of things that we can do in our own backyard, if someone has a backyard or has some outdoor space, planting a butterfly garden is a wonderful way to help monarch butterflies when they come through. On the beaches, when sea turtles are hatching and when piping plovers are hatching, if we rope off the beach during the breeding area, there's a significant improvement in success of survival rates of turtles and birds. And I think, again, we have to think about, and a lot of people are thinking about this, how to just live more modestly. Do we have to take an airplane everywhere? You know, can we ride a bike? Can we not use those plastic bags? And I think also on a very personal level, what each child might be able to do is, and this is something I did with my kids, is find a sit spot. We called it a sit spot in nature, where you sit and you close your eyes and you listen and you smell, and then you open your eyes and you observe, and you have a journal and you write down what you observed. Maybe you draw a picture. And this is a way that each of us can stay connected to nature, which is something that many people rediscovered during lockdown, how crucial the outdoors is for all of our health, wildlife and people alike.
Lenora, thank you so very much. I think we're going to be welcomed by all of our guests now. Everyone should pop back in. Hello, everyone. I have one final question for all three of you, and it's this. I'm an English teacher, and I have always loved books. Why do you love reading? Why are books so magical? Why should we all join this STEAM race to space? Philippe.
Well, first, I just want to thank Lenora for her wonderful suggestions about nature and animals. she's so right. We're actually this spring going to be planting a butterfly garden ourselves. So that's a wonderful thing to be doing. Milkweed, particularly for the monarchs. But why do I love books? I love books. I do television and we do animated shows and we do all sorts of different media. But I love books because I think it offers the reader an opportunity to imagine themselves in the story and as part of the characters in a way that that moving television and animated doesn't. It's those experiences are so structured. But for books, it's really about joining the journey and as Lenora said, closing your eyes and imagining yourself and listening and hearing and being a part of the world and in that world in a really exciting, in-depth way and really personal way. So I love books for that reason.
Thank you. Gabrielle, how about you?
I think the reasons that Philippe said, of course, but also, books, one of the things that all these books that we're talking about today have done, they've helped us to understand some different information about different aspects of life on Earth or in the solar system. But it goes beyond that with these books and with all books, is that it helps us to empathize with things that are more distant from us. So my book is about empathizing with Pluto, I think, a little bit, but also, giving perspective on who you are in the solar system. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. And Philippe and Lenora's books are about empathizing, not just empathizing with animals, but also understanding your role in terms of the safety and happiness of animals on Earth and Earth in general. And I think all books do that, more so than movies and TV, because I think you can insert yourself into a book. That's the missing part of a book, right? Is like the life, and you're the one who puts the life into it, right? So it makes it much more intimate and personal to you and helps you to empathize. So that's why I love books.
Lenora?
Well, I agree 100% with Philippe and Gabriella. Empathy, absolutely. One of the things that I tried to do in the stories in this book is really write as close as I could to the perspective of the animal. I don't know the animal's perspective. I wouldn't pretend to know that. But I tried to sit as a narrator on the shoulder. So that when you see a kangaroo hopping through empty streets, you might wonder, that's strange. Why would the kangaroo be hopping through the empty streets? Was that fun? Was it looking for something? That was my hope with this particular book. And in terms of reading in general, for me, nothing better than disappearing into the imagination. And actually disappearing is the wrong word. It's like integrating into your imagination and being someplace else. Maybe you're there, maybe you're not. Maybe you learned something you didn't know. Maybe you get to see funny images or beautiful images. For me, images are so important, and colorful writing is so important. But also storyline, and storylines are hard to write. But it's such a wonderful way to be in the world without the input, the sensory input of everything that's going on around us. Just a page, just a word, maybe a picture.
Well, I'm excited for our young viewers today because, again, everything says to us we're reading more. This crazy, terrible time with the pandemic, we opened up more books. We learned more about our world, and as all three of your books also show, we learned also ways that we can make this world a better place. And I think that's so important. So I want to thank all three of you so very, very much for joining us today. These books are fantastic. Please make sure they are the first three you check off when you join the S.T.E.A.M Race to Space Reading Challenge. I would start with these three and make my way through the rest of the wonderful choices that are there. So thank you so very, very much today.